Happy Boxing Day, everybody. Before we get into our third annual very special Boxing Day episode with Jay Shapiro, a quick warning. We will be discussing and spoiling two films, Michael Haneke's Funny Games from 1997 and John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982. I highly recommend you watch both of these films before listening to this episode. You can rent The Thing for $4 pretty much anywhere, and you can watch Funny Games for free on Max or rent it for $4 elsewhere. They're both really good films, and as a bonus, if you watch both of them, you'll know what the heck we're talking about and all of the references we make. I hope you enjoy this year's Boxing Day episode. We certainly did. Jay, happy Boxing Day.
Michael, happy Boxing Day to you as well.
It's a very special Boxing Day episode, our third annual. That sounds fun to say.
Yes.
I feel like once you reach the third year, it's become officially a thing.
I think that's right. Is there a song for Boxing Day? I was thinking there should be. If there's not, then you should sing it if there is a one. I don't know.
I imagine there is one. And I imagine if I was going to sing one, I'd have to put on some kind of faux British accent because it's a British holiday.
Yeah, you taught me that last year. I've forgotten everything there is to know about Boxing Day. It's also 7:30 in the morning for you. So singing this early would be a treat to your audience.
Have a happy little Boxing Day.
There, we've done it. You created the song for Boxing Day. If it didn't exist, now it does.
Hello, governor.
No, you've gone too far.
Apologies to all our British listeners. I think that's the one accent you're still allowed to do in 2024, 2025.
That's the one, yeah.
So Jay, it's been a minute. It's been a minute since our listeners have heard from you. It's been a minute since you and I have properly caught up. It's been a busy year, I think, for both of us. So what the heck have you been up to? How has your 2024 been?
2024. I mean,
you're in Madrid still.
I'm still in Madrid. Madrid is home. Madrid is home now. So that's good for your listeners who know the backstory. I think I moved 5 times in 5 years when COVID hit, starting in New York and bouncing around, but always knew I was going to end up in Europe. And now, yeah, we've been here for more than a year and it's home. Madrid is great. I really like Spain. Well on our way to where we have residency, of course, but well on our way to hopefully citizenship and all that good stuff in the future. It really feels like home. 2024, I don't know how to answer this, Michael, because this is a fun show. And 2024 was a heavy year, I think, for a lot of people. For those who know my other work on my show, I was very deeply involved and still am, of course, in the Palestine-Israel issue and a lot of very important thinking and growth, I think, on my end and for my family, particularly my mom, dealing with some very, very heavy stuff. We're going to get to the holiday traditions, I think. And so I was raised Jewish. The last name gives away a lot of it. And so 2024 was a year of a lot of very fraught and difficult deep dives into my upbringing and how it bounces against the world and other people around me. So politically and philosophically, it was sort of a supercharged year. I started writing my book, which is a huge, huge leap for me.
That's amazing.
Signed a little contract with Collective Books. There's no date yet. Probably a year and a half before it ever is available out there. But it's called Judging History, and it's very much on this topic. It's not a book just about Israel-Palestine, but a moral philosophy book about really the expression, the phrase, I'm on the right side of history, or history will vindicate me, really what we mean by that, and a very deep dive into how to think about that question, how to think morally about progress, if it is such a thing. And that's been really, really gratifying. I'm in chapter 4. There's probably 10 chapters, so my head is swimming with all of this stuff. So I'm grateful to have an outlet to think out loud on a page for these things. And I think I'm making some sense, hopefully, and making sense to myself. So that's been great in 2024. But yeah, so other than the sort of political and professional stuff, the life stuff's been good and easy, just more and more settled into Madrid. Have some friends who have also made two of them have actually done the sale of their American life and on their way, not to Madrid, but to Europe. And I think some of that was also prompted by the Trump election for some people, which I think was a Titanic moment for a few. But yeah, I don't know. 2024 was good. How about you?
Well, before we get to me, I just have a few follow-up questions.
Fire away.
Now that you're a proper Madrid resident.
Madrianos, yeah.
Probably got the lay of the land. You probably can walk around without getting disoriented, unlike probably your first couple weeks there where you were like, wait a second, did I make a left at the wrong place? Do I know how to get back home without looking at my phone?
Yeah.
What is one of your favorite restaurants in Madrid and why?
My wife and I are vegan, so the vegan scene here is a little shaky, to be honest. But it's getting better. It's getting better. There's the history of that is really interesting. We're right in the midpoint of the Crusades, then the Reconquista, and this very old Muslim Christian fight that happened here. The history is fascinating. And I don't know how true this is. I think there's some truth to it. Part of the kind of like revenge middle finger of the Christian Reconquista of Spain was to like eat as much pork as possible and hang it in the windows. So the classic, like walking down the street and seeing pig legs hanging is a very Spanish thing. And that goes back to kind of the like middle finger to the Muslims. So needless to say, the vegan scene is late to the party here coming along. There's a restaurant called Vega that I like quite a bit. That's a vegan restaurant. There's two of them in Madrid, actually. So yeah, it's just a really good vegan restaurant that serves all kinds of interesting stuff. Yeah. The food scene here is decent. I will say, Spanish food, traditional Spanish cuisine, I don't think is very good. Don't tell them that. They get very defensive over it, but it's like patatas bravas, okay, like this thing called a tortilla, which is not a tortilla as Americans know it, but it's a potato pie, basically. It's very bland. I like very spicy food. Spain does not. Paella, there is a vegan paella place that does a decent one. You know what, I'm going to switch my answer. Vega's good, but I'll say this as my answer. There's a place that we just discovered called the Vegan Roll, and it's a vegan sushi place. I've been vegan like 6 or 7 years now since I met my wife. Sushi was the one food that I missed the most, and that there really was no good kind of alternative. You could do vegetable sushis and the asparagus stuff, but this is an imitation fish technique that is really good and completely like scratched the itch of like, this is sushi as I remembered it pre-vegan, and it's really good. And they're like the nicest people in the world. So if you're ever in Madrid, it's like just these lovely ladies who are just the nicest people in the world. So it's in a cool part of town too. So the Vegan Roll, that gets my vote.
Okay, I'll have to check it out. I would love to visit Madrid. My wife, Anne, speaks very highly of it. And of course, as do you. Okay, one other Madrid-related question. What is your favorite thing to do there? What's something that now that you're a resident and not a tourist anymore, that you just day to day or week to week just really enjoy doing in Madrid?
Retiro Park. I mean, this is actually kind of funny because it overlaps with what the tourists do also. It's like the central park of Madrid. It's called Retiro, the Gran Retiro, I think. It's the big park in the middle of the city, but it just lives up to it. There's a section in it where there's peacocks that they keep roaming semi-free. They live there, pavos reales in Espanol. They trim it in this way that looks like Alice in Wonderland, and there's like baby ducks there, and then these peacocks, and it's like this magical place. So yeah, as cliche as it is, a walk in Retiro Park, which is a very popular thing to do on the weekends, and for tourists, it lives up to it. There's just like rose gardens in it, and there's spaces. It's a pretty crowded city now. The world, all cities are getting kind of crowded. Madrid is no exception. But you could find spots in Retiro, even on a very crowded day, that feel spacious and you could just like relax. And so that's the winner for me.
I think the only fun fact I have to offer about Spain is that I don't know if it's confirmed, but it is what people believe is the most likely etymology of ole, 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 is that it descends from Allah, speaking of Reconquista.
That is interesting. That might be, I wonder if it was, again, because there's like a weird animosity, not now, but I wonder if it was at first sort of like a making fun of it, the way that like the weird like Washington Redskins and Atlanta Braves do like the chop, and you're like, this feels a little in poor taste. I wonder if at first it was like that. That's interesting. Yeah. I live not too far from the Real Madrid Stadium, which I've been to once, not to see a game, but I was touring it. I have yet to get into European football, but maybe. It's a maybe at this point, because most Spanish people would be like, I think Spain, this is really embarrassing. Spain won the Euro Cup this year, I believe. There's a big parade. They're really good. Real Madrid wins everything. Spain wins the World Cup all the time. I should probably get into the culture, but yeah.
I think we're both blessed this is not a sports podcast because I got nothing.
Yeah, that's true. Because yeah, that's good. Well, you listened well.
I do what I can. Yeah, my 2024 was a mixed bag. In the same way that, it's a Boxing Day episode. We're here to discuss two of our favorite films. It's going to be light. But I also want to be honest. In some ways, it was a very lonely year. Part of the reason why I took a break from the show was because of that. And I don't want to get too deep into it because it would become an hour-long conversation. And you would turn to my therapist and I'm already paying someone to do that. But there was kind of a shadow of loneliness that was kind of hanging over most of the year. And I'm dealing with that. But there was also a lot of good stuff. Anne and I celebrated our 1-year wedding anniversary on October 29th, which is pretty cool. And also, we are expecting a daughter.
Wow.
She will arrive in June of 2025.
That is news to me. Congratulations.
I thought about telling you right before we started recording, but I was like, you know what? I'll keep it for the show.
I never know how to react. I'm like, way to go. One of them hit the bullseye. You nailed it, Michael.
Exactly. Got one past the goalie. Yeah.
Well, congrats. That's amazing.
Thank you. We're very excited.
June is a good month. My brother was born in June. My mom was born in June.
That's great.
Good June vibes. I'm July 3rd, so if she's a little late, she could hit it. But
yeah,
congrats. That's huge. That's huge.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we just had the 3rd appointment with the doctor as of this recording 2 days ago. When this airs, I guess 2 weeks ago. And it was cool watching the baby move around in the sonogram, see her little hands and her little head, like see her brain. It's wild because we can talk about her, we can see her, but she's not here yet. It's like she exists in this liminal space where she is both here and not here at the same time. It's an interesting feeling because I've never quite experienced anything like that.
Yeah, me either. No kids on my end and none coming. This can be confirmed, but that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm excited to meet her. Those were the two big.
It's pretty big
ticket items.
Loneliness and a daughter. I mean, that's a whole separate podcast, I guess.
I know. Loneliness and a daughter. That sounds like I don't know, like an indie band or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, overall, a lot of good stuff happened this year. Spoke to some really amazing people on the show, and I think when I'm in the right headspace, which is most of the time, I would say, the show is so incredibly rewarding. Not only does it give me an opportunity to do a fun episode with you like this, but also just it's the same privilege that you get with your podcast, is that you get to speak with some truly amazing people that you respect about topics you care about. And do you ever find yourself when you're recording episodes of The Dilemma, whether they're like kind of the special episodes that you've been doing on Israel-Palestine or the traditional episodes?
Which I don't know if I'm ever going to go back to, frankly, but yeah.
What's also nice about having a podcast too is, I mean, this show has changed in terms of its focus over the years. And I imagine a few years from now, it'll be different in some ways than it is today. It's kind of like, a little ship of Theseus where it's the same show, but it's not really the same show. But do you ever feel that way where even now, after years of doing the Dilemma podcast, you find yourself talking with someone where you're like, I cannot believe I'm talking to this person. This is amazing.
Yeah, all the time. I mean, I think just about all my guests, I have that. I talked to Ilan Pappé this year. Love him or hate him, I love him. I think he's an incredible historian and speaker, Israeli, and part of the critical historians of the Israel Zionist project. But amazing to talk to him. And Vijay Prashad, who I just talked to, was just blew me away with our conversation. I have a few lined up that I'm really excited about. We're trying to branch the conversations out because, so I used to do more, like I think you called them normal, or like these more, it was like more of a format. It was like take a dilemma, talk to a philosopher or author about like a trolley problem-ish type dilemma. And then when I very first started, Coleman Hughes and I would just bat him around, and it was kind of fun. And I really loved that format, but I was sort of retiring it and focusing on other stuff and helping write someone else's book, which is coming out in March, an audiobook project with Annika Harris. And then, October 7th was the thing that plunged me into like, I think I have to do this on my own because I don't love what other people are saying about it in my world. And so the focus obviously, has really shifted. But now I'm trying to take the conversation from, I know I've garnered a pretty energized audience on the Palestine issue in particular, which is a fairly excitable audience, and they're focused. And I'm trying to give them a little bit of a broader philosophical perspective to take the issue. Like VJ did it so well. If people are interested in that episode, I thought it's a great place to start. VJ and I took the Palestine issue, but took it in this broader context of the global South generally, and what's maybe happening in the world and where this slots in, and maybe why people are so excited about it as a stand-in for other things about neocolonialism and the changing world order. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. So I'm trying to continue that process a bit in the next few. Yeah, it's super rewarding. I wasn't expecting to do it. October 7th, which was not 2024, but basically started 2024 for me, changed a lot, including my professional focus. So no, it's huge. Yeah.
I'll link your episode with VJ in the show notes. So if anyone's interested in listening.
VJ is a great place to start. And like you said, I've been doing some also video essays that are just me if people are just interested in my argumentation. But VJ was a great episode, great place to start. If you like that, you'll probably like a lot of the other conversations I had recently. So
that's great. Hard transition.
Yeah.
I don't have a soft way to transition, but in the spirit of the holiday, right? I mean, Christmas just happened yesterday. So what are some of your holiday traditions, if you have any? And specifically, what were some cherished ones that you had as a child? And do you have any today?
As a child, my family celebrated Hanukkah. Hanukkah's a little weird in America. I guess it's a global holiday, but it seemed, in my view, a very American Jewish holiday.
Oh yeah, it's been like Christmatized.
Yeah, it competes with Christmas, and it was very fun. There was spinning dreidels. My mom got into it. We did the 8 days of presents thing, kind of, but I remember, I think, like getting everything on the first night, and then the other nights were like a lottery ticket or something small, some chocolate or something to give you something of the 8 days.
No sense of tension. You feel like you'd start small on the first 7 days and build to the 8th day.
I think my brother and I just probably didn't have the patience for this.
Oh, they were doing it for your benefit. Yeah.
They just probably didn't want to just deal with our whining of like, we would cry if day 2 was kind of boring or something. Like, just get it, whatever. We were probably bratty.
I don't care about socks, Mom.
Yeah. Give me the bike. I know you got it. So Hanukkah was fun. It wasn't like, I don't think we did anything very unique to other American Jewish families, but we, one of my cherished memories though is always, I grew up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, across a little river from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Bethlehem shares the name of Bethlehem, and they get very, very into it. I actually don't know why it's called Bethlehem. It probably was I don't know. It was probably a Christian settlement at some point. But they get really into their Bethlehemness in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which is a lovely town. There's a Moravian star that's up on a hill. I think when I was a kid, there used to be a ordinance that if you put lights on your window, they had to just be white. I think that's right. And so it was very pretty. It was like all of Bethlehem was lit up with white lights. And then we would drive around listening to Christmas carols in the car on the radio back when that was a thing. And there was a couple houses that did the crazy, like a million lights, and someone dresses up like Santa and gives you like a candy cane as you drive through, just like free, just like some weirdo with a farm who decides to go nuts. Everyone, I think in every suburb or town had that.
Yeah.
That was fun. I remember marveling at that, which might be why this year I have a Christmas tree for the very first time in my life. It's fake. It's from the bazaar down the street, but we always had like a dumb little one. It didn't really count. It was almost like ironic in New York. You get like a little, whatever, Dwayne Reed style one. But we got like actually a bigger one, and I've been putting presents under it for her that have been coming in the mail. So I'm like doing the Christmas thing now, and it's like there's ornaments on it. No Jesus-y stuff, but so that's the first year I did that. But I do have to say, my most cherished, this isn't quite holiday, this is kind of cheating. I think that answers your question maybe in a more interesting way. My wife and I, she describes herself as ex-Muslim. I describe myself as ex-Jew. Like, we don't have any religion. We don't care about this stuff at all. We don't have kids, so we don't have the pressure of a kid running around saying they want to do whatever. But we love traditions, and we want them, and we've always wanted them in our lives, and we came up with one. So again, this is kind of cheating because we're both music nerds. It was like the thing we connected over when we met, indie kids rattling off indie bands from the 90s, and it was part of our love affair. So we do this thing 4 times a year. So every solstice and equinox, so summer, winter, fall, spring, we do this thing called Make Your Case. And I came up with the title. I'm very proud of it, where we take the whole day off. We treat it like a real holiday. And we spend all day secretly nerding out and compiling a presentation to give to the other person, like a Google talk, like with like slides and everything at night. So we get a bottle of wine. I present to her 3 albums that I will make the case for why we should go out and own on vinyl. We collect them on vinyl. Why we should own the album. And it could be personal. It could be like nostalgic for me of like I was in high school and I changed my life, or it could just be important to music, whatever. We make our case. It's very nerdy. We can show each other videos. We like show, like we do a little guessing game of like, this is where the band's from and the year the album came out. So I present one, then she presents one, then I present one. So I present 3, she presents 3. We alternate as we're getting drunk on a bottle of wine. And we play, of course, the songs from the album to try to convince the other person, this is why you should pick this album. She picks one of mine. I pick one of hers, and that's it. And then we go out and try to find the album in vinyl in the world. And so the winter solstice falls on December 21st or the 20th. It was always right before Christmas. And so it counts, I think, as like starting our holiday season. And I recommend everyone do this. If you and your partner or your wife or your friends or whatever, like it's super, super, super fun. And you get to build a vinyl collection. Well, you don't have to buy them. You could just print them out. But owning them, which I'm pointing to behind me here where I have them, is really special. And we play them all the time. And make your case. That's my favorite tradition. And it's mine.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So when you both decide which record from the other's case that you want to buy, do you call that the vinyl say?
Michael. Michael. Well, you're going to be a dad in 6 months. And so I guess you should just start the dad jokes now.
The vinyl word? Yeah.
You got me. No, we don't, but now we will. Now we will. That's really good.
Those are like the best kind of traditions where they're idiosyncratic and unique to you and your family or you and your friends, and they're just yours. And they're like your own little holiday.
Yeah. We visited my mom, and she lives in Florida. It randomly happened to fall over the last one, the fall make your case. And so we were like, you're going to do it. You're going to present 3. And she did. And it was amazing. It was really cute. She's 72, 73. So you could plug in her timeline, but she presented Simon and Garfunkel's 3 a.m.
Was
that the one? Wednesday morning, 3 a.m.?
No, I mean, I was like, there's some, Simon and Garfunkel will pop in there based on her age.
Simon and Garfunkel, Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. Harry Chapin, and it was storytelling, which was a nice one. Harry Chapin's a good one. And Fleetwood Mac, although it wasn't rumors. She presented the album with Tusk on it. And we got together and got our heads together and we decided on Simon and Garfunkel Wednesday morning, 3 a.m., which I own. And I own a Spanish copy of it now. They sing in English, but all of the language is, I guess it's Miraculas a las 3 de la mañana. I think I may have gotten that right, but that's Wednesday morning, 3 a.m., Simon E. Garfunkel.
That's fun.
Yeah, it's really fun.
That's a really fun tradition. I mean, I love any excuse to like get up in front of people and like have to try to make the case for something.
You would be really good at this.
So fun.
You should. I recommend you start this. Maybe yours would be movies because I think you're more of a movie buff, but going out and owning it on DVD or something, that'd be super fun too.
That'd be fun, or Blu-ray or something. Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah.
All right. I'll pitch the idea to Anne.
Yeah, seriously. No, it's like a lot of people, you try to start traditions, everyone, but this one's sticking. It's working. Like we've been doing it and we treat it seriously. It's awesome. Yeah.
That's really cool. By the way, before I forget, just because it tickled my brain. So Bethlehem, Pennsylvania was indeed named after the biblical town, but it was named in 1741 on Christmas Eve. The Moravians were a Protestant denomination from the Czech Republic who established the town as a utopian community.
Yeah, this happens. Like Utah did that with, they called it Zion with the Mennonites or whoever's up there. So the Moravian star, if you look that up, it's like a special, I should know this. I saw it all the time. Maybe a 7 or 8 pointed star. It's a very popular gift to get in Bethlehem. The Moravian, they have a very like unique star, but that's what they put on this mountain up there. Yeah, I don't know if it's a utopia anymore. If you go, they kind of overshot the vision there, but Bethlehem's nice.
I know so little about Pennsylvania. I think the only town in Pennsylvania I have been to is Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
That's the Amish town, yeah.
And I really liked it. And I was corrected immediately on my mispronunciation of the town's name because in California, you may well know, we have a Lancaster, California. And it's funny that it may make sense that the way that Californians pronounce our town with that name is exactly the California accent. And the way that people in Pennsylvania pronounce their town is like pretty much exactly the Pennsylvanian accent. Lancaster, I mean, that is so Californian, and Lancaster is so East Coast. Literally, I was buzzing into the hotel and I was like, yeah, this is my first time in Lancaster. And she was like, Lancaster, like jumped on me. And I was like, oh, yes, Lancaster.
Funny. I don't think I ever encountered that. I must just automatically have said it right.
You have a way.
Because, yeah, Pennsylvania's a weird place.
But in terms of our Christmas traditions, I mean, as a child, I have memories of knowing now what was happening. At the time, I thought I was hearing Santa's reindeer on the roof of our house when I was like 6 or 7 years old. And now I know it must have been my dad on the roof.
He literally went on the roof and
made noises and stuff. Yeah. And like little hooves and stuff. Or I don't know, the sound of hooves. We would leave milk and cookies out the night before for Santa. And then in the morning, the milk would always be like half drunk and the cookies would be like mostly crumbs and stuff. And I'm like, that was probably my dad enjoying himself.
I like how you still say the word probably, as if there's still like a shred of doubt that you're like, I'm holding on to hope.
I mean, it could have been my mom eating those cookies, but I'm pretty sure it was my dad.
Yeah.
Or Santa.
Yeah, or Santa, keep a dream alive.
Could have been Santa.
Yeah.
And then Christmas Eve, we would go to a Christmas Eve church service. And then after that, we'd go to a little steakhouse called Haps, which was fun. And then Christmas morning, we'd come down, we'd eat breakfast, and then we would open our stockings, and then we would open our presents. And then around like 1, 2 p.m., which I always was frustrated by, I can appreciate more now as an adult. But at the time, I was frustrated that we did this because I would always get like video games on Christmas. And I'm like, I want to play these video games I just got. But around like 1 or 2 p.m., we would drive from Pleasanton down to like Fresno, Dinuba, which is in Central California, and spend the day with my mom's side of the family, my grandma and grandpa, my cousins, my aunt and uncles. And it was fun seeing them. And we would spend a few days there. And so we did that all the time. But selfishly in the back of my mind, I'm like, I just got a new Nintendo 64 game. And like,
yeah,
I have to just think about it for the next 3 days. But as an adult now, looking back, I can appreciate the quality time spent with family.
That's very wholesome. Your whole story. It was very sweet.
Yeah, it was fun. And this year, Anne and I will be staying in LA. She's got a bad case of pregnancy nausea, but she's toughing it out. She's very strong, but it limits our ability to travel. So I also got a fake Christmas tree, which after this recording, although technically in the past, I'm going to be setting it up and then some lights on it. And I've got some stockings. She doesn't know about that. I've got some stockings with our names on them, and I'm going to fill the stockings up, and I got to put presents under the trees. I'm assuming our 3 dogs won't get at those presents or stockings, but one can't be too sure. But you know what, Jay? I think we should get to why we're here, which is to discuss 2 of our favorite horror films. You chose Funny Games by Michael Haneke from 1997.
A very appropriate last name for the holiday season. Anyway,
I know. Yes.
Spelled very differently, and I always thought it was Haneke or something because he's German.
I thought so too until I Googled it and I was like, I have to make sure I get this pronunciation correct. And The Thing by John Carpenter from 1982. Before we get into those films, I just want to know, Jay, what do you like in a horror film? What do you look for? What do you love about it?
I don't know what I love about horror films. I don't know if anyone does because it's creepy, which is, of course, Funny Games when we get to it is kind of a comment on that. But okay, so I can tell you what I don't like. I don't like supernatural horror films because the rules are too flimsy. Anything can happen. It's like I'm not grounded in it. So I like horror films to be an analogy, the monster or the event. The film I chose certainly doesn't have a monster. I think needs to like tap into something human as sort of something psychological, something universal. Stephen King is really good at this. I didn't choose any of his things, but something like It, which I liked the first one actually. I mean, the book was great, but the analogies are sometimes really on the nose with someone like Stephen King, but it's like a well where they all have to go back to their childhood and go into the well and discover what's like, it's great, but there's something so great about that. If you can just view the monster and the horror as an analogy for the genuine, dread of existence or fears of, death or the chaotic nature of the universe or whatever it is. And so, yeah, I guess that's why there's been a lot of really well done, well shot horror films in the last couple decades that fall into that supernatural category. Like, what was it called? Hereditary. Looked beautiful, was amazing, but something about them, I'm like, I just can't, because of the supernatural element, I just never go all the way. I think Killing of a Sacred Deer was also a little bit in that world. But yeah, I guess I don't mind the watching the gore. I like the Saw series, the first few. It gets pretty bad after that. Or Hostel. I think I could suspend the disbelief to actually just be impressed by the level of technique and the realism that they could pull off, knowing that it's a film, knowing that, it's not actually a snuff film. No one's actually getting hurt here, but wow, they're really tugging at it. So I can go pretty far in that direction, which maybe, Funny Games is weird when we talk about it because it's pretty brutal, but not really on screen when you think about it. I've always liked them. I've always been interested in them and attracted to them. I think the very first one I ever saw it's apropos to your selection, was Alien, the original Alien. My mom still tells the story that like I was a kid and all the adults were watching it and I insisted on watching it. And then I had nightmares for like months and I slept in their bed. I was probably like 6 years old or 7 years old or something. And she always says, she should have never let me watch it. But there's something about a good horror film that will, for me at least, just like underlines the art form of cinema as so effective that it can do that, right? It's just light and, shadow and sound on a screen, and it can scare the hell out of you, or it could have you, looking around your shoulder. It's that. I don't know. I like the invasiveness of the film itself tugging at my emotions. But yeah, I don't know.
And Funny Games certainly is invasive.
Yeah.
Which we will get to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you, and this is not surprising at all to me, it sounds like you like horror films that lean into analogy or allegory or social commentary, something that has a greater point or uses its conceit as a way to comment on the human condition or some aspect of humanity.
Yeah, including horror films themselves off camera before when we're batting them around. Like Cabin in the Woods is one of my favorite. Scream, of course, like the reflexive of the genre ones, which Funny Games kind of falls into to a degree, although a little bit more social commentary. Yeah, that's what brings me into them. If it's just gratuitous jump scares, it could be fun. I could get into it. And if maybe it's sacrilege, but like The Exorcist and stuff, like they're good. I understand The Omen, they're cool. Like they pull off the trick. But as soon as there's a demon or a god or some other supernatural element in it, then it's like, well, anything can happen. And that's not fun. I'm just watching rather than like feeling trapped. I never find myself thinking about them after they're done.
Yeah, for me, so before this year, I can probably count the horror films I've seen on two hands.
Yeah, this is new for you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I basically avoided horror films most of my life, with a few exceptions. I remember seeing Scream in my teens. I made an exception for Jordan Peele and watched his films. And then I would watch like movies that were commenting on the genre. So Cabin in the Woods I enjoyed because it had that kind of layer of irony that made it less terrifying for me. Or Shaun of the Dead, which I absolutely love.
Shaun of the Dead's great. Midsommar, did you see that one?
So yes, I'm in this little 3-person film club with Xavier Bonilla, the host of Converging Dialogues, and Angel Eduardo, another good friend of mine. And I believe you know him as well.
Yeah, I went in the club. Send me a pin. Yeah.
And each week we watch a new movie. We basically choose a genre. Each of us picks a film. And then we use a random number generator site. So I'll pick a film, Xavier will pick a film, Angel will pick a film, and then we'll number the films and then hit the random number generator, and that will pick what movie we watch. And one week we chose horror, and I can't remember if it was Angel or Xavier who chose Midsommar. That's what led me to watching that. But before that, like Anne was working on a slasher script throughout most of the year. And so she hadn't seen a ton of horror films either before that, but she just like dove headfirst and was watching like dozens of them for research. And after a while, I was like, you know what? This will be fun to watch some bangers. I just want to watch the cream of the crop, but I want to watch them. I think it'd be fun to watch with my wife. And so we started watching, and God, Sam Raimi is great. I mean, have you seen Evil Dead 2?
No, I haven't seen, I'm not like the Evil Dead series I've missed, but Evil Dead 1.
So Evil Dead 1 is more of a straight ahead horror with a comparatively tiny budget. Evil Dead 2 is in many ways kind of a remake of Evil Dead 1. It's a very similar story, but it has a lot more money comparatively. And it is terrifying, but also very funny. And one thing I've really grown to appreciate about Sam Raimi, and I promise I won't make this a Sam Raimi love fest because we do have 2 films to talk about, but he also has this 2009 film called Drag Me to Hell.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And PG-13, which is wild, but it is very effectively terrifying. But similarly, he might be the best director that I can name in his ability to wildly vacillate on a dime between genres and for it to work. Like he'll be mid-scene in like something that is literally terrifying you. And then within the scene, change the beat to comedy, have that be comedy for like a minute or two, and then change back to horror. And it never doesn't work in both Evil Dead 2 and in Drag Me to Hell. And I was like thinking about this with Anne. I was like, why is he able to do this? One, I mean, he's a very talented director, but two, the mechanism that operates underneath a comedy and a horror are actually quite similar. Comedy and horror need surprise and tension. You build to a laugh in the same way you build to a scare. And a laugh is like an explosion of emotion in the same way that like a scream or like, grabbing your partner or grabbing the couch is like a reaction to a tension built around being scared. And like just his ability within the scene. I mean, it's like watching a magician or someone juggle 10 flaming bowling pins and you're like, how are you getting away with this? So that was really fun. And then watched quite a few John Carpenter films, including The Thing, which we will also talk about. I want to talk about funny games first, but The Thing, like the reason I recommended it is I'm like evangelical about it now. It was one of those films that as I was watching it, I was like, oh, I think this is one of my favorite films now. It's rare when you have that experience, especially in a genre that you have avoided. But let's talk about funny games. I just wanted to see if you saw any similarities between these two films. For me, they both have this commonality of isolation, of being trapped with a thing that is with literally a thing or people who are trying to kill you or harm you. And just that feeling of being trapped. And as the audience, like you feel claustrophobic because you can't escape. And whether it's on a lake house or in the middle of the Antarctic, there's this real feeling of claustrophobia that is a main driver of the tension.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's probably pretty common to a lot of horror films, just trapping them somewhere. Yeah, I don't know what they're talking about. What I was saying, what I like about horror films and sort of an analogy for whatever, some deeper, more universal thing that you can read into the scare. I mean, I know we'll get to the thing, but it's, paranoia and disease and, deceit and who can you really trust, where there is an element of that in funny games where I think Hanukkah talked about it being like there's two films colliding. It's like two genres colliding. It's this family in a drama with a mild bit of tension that he's setting up and like maybe a marriage with some cracks around the edges. And then these two psychopaths who come from there. He also talks about like, it's kind of nice. It's, or maybe different, that it's not like a different social class. It's not a class commentary of, some downtrodden poor people coming to kill the rich or something and terrorizing them, or a killer with some weird backstory of being terrorized or whatever. It's these two tennis outfit wearing guys from the neighborhood with like combed hair wearing white gloves for some reason. And it's like very clean and like sterile. And it's like the two movies are kind of fighting each other of like, wait, how are these two movies going to interact and collide? And yeah, so I don't know, maybe in some ways it echoes this paranoia with The Thing, with the comparison of you don't know who to trust. They can look exactly the same and you're not sure who's a threat around you. Well, that's what this family kind of realizes is like, anybody can do this, right? Like murder and mayhem and hostage, whatever they're doing, they're just screwing with this family and causing them a lot of pain and torture for their own enjoyment. There doesn't need to be some deeper cause for that violence, and it could come right from next door. So for that element, it's like, can you trust your neighbor? They don't have to look different. It doesn't need to be this creepy guy with, like who's drunk on the street with a gun. No, it's like this nice boy next door asking for eggs.
Right. Who aren't even armed when you first meet them.
Yeah.
So plot summary wise, and again, I implore, as I would every year, that if you have not seen either of these movies, pause this conversation, go watch them and come back because this is going to be a spoiler-filled discussion. So the basic plot summary of Funny Games is there's Anna, there's her husband, George. I guess technically in the film it's pronounced Gorg, but I'm going to say George. Sorry. Anna, George, and Georgie, their little son. And they're I believe vacationing out at a lake house when right after they arrive, they're visited by one of their neighbors who introduces them to this young man who they say is a friend, Peter, who is wearing these white gloves and like lake shorts and like a white shirt. The son and the father go out onto the lake in a boat, and Anna is home alone, getting ready for some dinner they were going to having with friends later that night when Peter drops in and he's asking if he can have 4 eggs because the neighbor, whose name is escaping me, is making some food. And so he's there on her behalf and can he borrow some eggs? And it leads to this kind of tense situation where the politeness starts kind of slipping into kind of a veiled threat. And then his friend Peter shows up and then yada, yada, yada. It turns out that Paul and Peter were in fact not friends of the neighbors, but in fact have killed the neighbors. And now they are there to terrorize and potentially kill this family.
Which you don't know at that point.
Right, you're right. A minor spoiler. We don't know that they had killed the neighbors.
No, but I mean the spoiler within the retelling of it. Like at that point.
At that point, you don't know. Correct. You find that out later. So what's great about the movie, and we can talk about more details as we go on, is that The main thrust of the first like 20 minutes of the encounter is all around a feeling that I'm sure all of us have felt at some point where you're just in a very uncomfortable situation, but like social niceties kind of are dictating what you should or shouldn't say. Where I'm sure we've all been there where like we're having a very uncomfortable conversation with someone, usually like a stranger or like a semi-stranger, and you just want to be like, dude, I'm not comfortable right now. I don't like this. I'm going to go. But all the social graces that have been drilled into you over the course of your life have been like, all right, yes, no, thank you, not interested. And you're just trying to politely get them to go. And all you want to say is get the F out. And that's a huge thrust of the first 20 minutes.
He's already accidentally, in quotes, knocked the it wasn't a cell phone at the time, the wireless phone, it was 1997, into the sink full of water, which if you watch the replay of it, like he clearly just taps it in there. But anyway, we'll get to the filmmaking, the funny game that Haneke's playing with us throughout every scene. So I saw it in the theater. And so you probably also found this out and know this. It's very weird. There's an American remake of this film, which is literally like a shot-for-shot remake.
Directed by the same director, in the same house, with the same props.
It's sort of weird. Like he showed it he showed it at Cannes. This one from 1997 was kind of a hit there. It was a big stir. It caused a lot. Some people walked out, some people booed. It was a big thing at Cannes, but he was approached by whatever distributor who was like, we love it. Americans don't love subtitles. Do you think you could do a version of this in English? And he basically said, if these actors will do it, I'll do it. They said yes. And he was like, shot for shot, boom. Like he did it. It's kind of amazing. But anyway, they're really, really similar movies. I love this 1997 version. So I saw it in the theater and it blew me away. Again, one of these films that I thought about after many, many times and wanted to return to, and it was creeping me out in the right way.
So you were like 15 when you saw it? 14, 15?
Yeah, because it was 1997. I don't know, it was released in America, but yeah.
Oh, maybe a year later.
Yeah, it was like an art house film. So anyway, I revisited it years later and it's always stuck with me. It probably hit me at a time when I was getting, much like you, really into the idea of filmmaking. I wanted to be a writer, I wanted to be a filmmaker. And the reason why this sticks with you is from the very beginning, the question is, what is the funny game being played here? It's a play on words the entire time. Like you said, there's these niceties of the funny games we play about, can't you just take this dude and throw him out of your house and say, fuck off, like he's just being annoying. But no, we play these funny games about being nice and being polite, even though like we think someone's really screwing with us or something. But from the very beginning, from the filmmaker, he's screwing with us from the very beginning. So the opening shot is now a very cliche shot, and he wasn't the first to do it, is this overhead bird's eye view looking down at a car driving along the woods. Literally, because I'm sure I'll never listen to this, but I edited a film where a director used this exact same open. It was a boat. Everyone's used it in horror films, right? And it was a cliche by the time even Haneke did it here. And the music that you're hearing in the beginning, I think we do our film school nerd stuff, but it was diegetic music at the beginning, which means that the source of the sound is in the thing. But you don't know that at first.
Coming from inside the car stereo, yeah.
Right? So like the very first shot is like beautiful classical music being played. And you're seeing this car and you assume it's a soundtrack. But then you cut into the car and you realize, oh, this lovely little couple is playing a little guessing game. And they are so well versed in classical music that his wife's trying to guess exactly which movement this is. And she gets it right and then ejects the CD and then the sound stops. And you realize, oh, that's a diegetic sound. And she puts in another one and it's lovely classical music. And you know, that's how this film starts. But then out of nowhere, the music changes to an insane piece of music by, I looked it up, it's like Boneyard, this like insane...
It's death metal.
Yeah, it's a jazz musician in New York who does really avant-garde scream metal stuff. I should look them up. It's like Boneyard something. Anyway, they're crazy if you look up opening. And it's like a scary sound. And the editing doesn't stop, which is so cool. Like it still cuts into the family talking, but you can't hear anything. Like it's totally disconnected. And so it's this very unsettling, like, what am I watching? Who's in charge here? The filmmaker can do anything and he's doing it. And it's like ripping the scene in half. Like I was settling in, what do they say? Like creating a parasocial relationship with the characters or whatever, right from the beginning of, oh, they're playing this cute little game and I can hear it. And now it's, no, there's a soundtrack of insane kind of scary death metal playing and this lovely family that doesn't match at all. So from the very beginning, I think you're alerted to like, this is a film you're going to be screwed with by the filmmakers and the techniques of filmmaking all throughout. We'll save the breaking the fourth wall stuff because it comes a little later in a really interesting way. But the first time upon rewatching it that I think the techniques of filmmaking, and a very simple one, of when he knocks the phone into the full sink or whatever. If you watch it on replay, Hanukkah must have just told him, like, don't try to make it look that accidental, because he actually just takes his hand and like knocks it in. But you're not watching that as the viewer. You're watching the action in the other part of the frame of her walking out in the back. And so you kind of just miss it. You hear it and you look at it. He didn't cut to a close-up. He didn't draw attention to it. So already you're like, wait, was that on purpose? Was that an accident? You're already being screwed with just on the technique of, like, as a director, don't move the camera, stay wide, trust that the audience's eyes will follow the action of the person walking out, and you miss it. Yeah, and so then we could go further into the film, but the first moment of massive violence, and I'll point this out for people who did pause it and watched it, it's a pretty brutal film with a lot of violence, but actually in the frame, because I rewatched it again, of course, for this, the only time you actually ever see someone get, in quotes, killed was actually the fatter one, Peter. I think I always get them mixed up. Peter,
Yep.
When he gets shot.
Tubby,
Yeah.
as they say.
When he gets shot in the stomach, which then is rewound and undone. All the other killings, all of them, happen off screen. Like when the dude's making a sandwich and when you're just cut somewhere else, or they happen between the cuts. So you never actually see anyone get killed in this film for real, but you know it's happening. And he's also playing with your imagination. You could hear some of it. It sounds kind of brutal, but your imagination is filling in the violence. And that's what Hanukkah wants you to do, and question of, like, why are you doing this? Why are you watching this movie? Why do you like this? Why are you here? And then, of course, the first time that Peter winks at the camera, it's also a little bit like he's looking right at the camera.
He breaks the fourth wall 5 times.
Okay, 5.
When Paul does it. So Peter never breaks the fourth wall.
I keep getting them mixed up, yeah.
I know. Peter, Paul, the guy with the skinny guy with the short shorts.
Yeah.
He breaks the fourth wall 5 times. The first time he does it is when he's having Anna look for the dog.
Yes. And he turns and he winks. Yeah.
I think because I wasn't expecting it, I actually didn't catch that he did it. I caught the next time he did it.
Well, the first time he does it, because that wink,
yeah,
it's shot so well that you're like, wait, is he winking at the other character? Is someone behind? But we never cut that way. So you can kind of dismiss it being like, no, that wasn't at me. Like, this is
right.
just part of the film.
Yeah.
But then the second time I think is when he's on the couch and he turns.
He literally talks to you.
Yeah. And he's like, who do you think's going to win the bet, when he makes a bet that they'll be dead by 9 a.m. And it's very weird. Like, it's a very strange moment. And I don't know how it struck you the first time when you were sure he was talking to you. I'll say the reason I really loved it is there's a bit of an on the nose of this as well, but it's obviously a commentary. I touched on some of it there on violence and portrayals of violence in film and in media, and our fascination with violence. And you and I are both horror fans, or we're interested in the genre. So it's poking the question back at us of, like, what are you looking for here? I mean, there's a shot later that after he had killed the son,
Georgie.
Yeah. And there's blood on the TV. And the TV is showing, I mean, it's very on the nose. The TV is showing a car race, which famously everyone's like, are you watching just to see a car wreck and hoping for some carnage rather than just a lovely little fast trip around the track? And of course, that analogy to horror movies of, like, what are you doing here? He kind of knew he was going to piss off his audience with a lot of this violence that's happening. But it's almost questioning of being like, you knew this was a horror film. Like, why did you come here? Though maybe it's the same reason. Why are you watching that car race? Just secretly hoping for the car wreck. And so, yeah, I just kind of love that question the whole time, and that you're in the hands of Hanukkah. He's the one who is talking to you and asking you questions the whole time, much more than the characters. We've already mentioned it now that it's absurd after finally she grabs the gun and shoots him, and you think, oh, the good guys are going to have the upper hand or something, and I'm rooting for them. He's like so in your face at that point, Hanukkah, to break the rules of being like, I'm literally going to have my character pick up a remote control and rewind it and undo that thing that you probably were like celebrating just to screw with you. Like, for no reason, just to be like, I'm the director. I get to be in charge here, which of course was the same thing that happened when she actually did pick up the gun and shoot. Like, someone wrote that, someone scripted that, someone acted that out. So what's the real difference of just rewinding it and doing it differently? Like, do you care what timeline is real in this film or not? You're just subject to the whims of Michael Hanukkah asking you questions about violence in the media and portrayal. So yeah, I just thought it was like a brilliant political cartoon, as it were, without even, I don't think, a very obvious conclusion. It's just good questions. And I guess as a philosophy fan, I'm like, this made me question a lot of things. It didn't scare me. It just made me question things. That's it.
Yeah, when I heard that a third of the audience at Cannes walked out, I think I read that before I watched it, and I was like, oh, it must be super violent, because I wanted to go in cold. I did not want to know anything about it.
That's how I did the thing as well. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, here we go. Are these people going to get tortured? Am I going to see this on screen? I hate torture porn.
Me too.
But there's got to be something that Jay loves about this. So here we go. And then, as you said, like, there's literally no violence on screen except for that one moment in which Anna shoots Peter, and then it's immediately undone. But every other death, whether it's Georgie, the son who dies first, and funny that Paul, while talking to Peter after Peter kills the son, tells Peter, we can't kill the son first because that eliminates all of the tension. And he's talking about the film, and he's talking about film conventions. So I'm wondering if why people walked out wasn't because of the violence, because really there is none to speak of besides that one moment that is immediately undone. But whether it's because the film is an indictment of the people watching the movie, and it's not a good feeling to feel. I mean, it's a feeling that he wants you to feel, which is like, why are you watching this? But my question back to Hanukkah would be, why did you bring me here?
Yeah.
You invited me to a KFC that you own, and then while I'm there, you lecture me about eating chicken. I mean, I liked the movie a lot. Hanukkah, interestingly enough, called it an anti-horror film. And he said, quote, I don't like violence and I don't like horror movies. I would never do a thriller or horror film for the sake of doing it, and I would say that Funny Games is a self-reflexive anti-horror film. It's a criticism of violence because that makes me angry, end quote. He withholds both violence and nudity from you, and then when you're disappointed you didn't get what you were expecting, he judges you for it. So there's this scene where Peter and Paul have Anna strip in front of her husband, and the two of them, they put a pillowcase over the boy's head so he can't see. But the entire time that she's naked, we don't see below her shoulders, but we see them looking at her, but we don't see it. And then she gets dressed again. And then like 20 minutes later, after we think that Peter and Paul have gone, after they kill their son, and we think they've left and that we think that the husband and wife are safe now, she changes into a shirt. And when she does, she has like a sheer bra. And then you see nudity then, and you're like, what's going on?
A little, yeah.
And that scene where we see the aftermath of Georgie's death, and the wall is splattered with blood and the TV is splattered with blood. It's a NASCAR race. That was an interesting choice because, and no offense to NASCAR fans, but it's like kind of a famously boring sport because the Daytona 500, it's 200 laps around a track, and the track is 2.5 miles long. So you're watching people do 2.5 mile laps, where really the only laps that matter are like the last 5 or 10. And so what are you really waiting for at a NASCAR race if you're not watching them race the cars? The implicit thing is, well, in the same way, no one wants to see a car accident, a terrible car accident. We all rubberneck after it's happened to see what happened. And so in a way, the NASCAR comparison there is, we all know, whether you want to admit it or not, that you showed up to this race where however many men are driving cars around a track for 4 hours. You didn't come to watch them drive cars around a track for 4 hours. You came with the hope, even if you don't want to admit it to yourself, that maybe there's going to be a pretty cool crash. And similarly, when you don't see the boy get killed and then you don't see the father get killed, but the implication there is you came to watch them get tortured. You came to watch them die. And when I don't show you that, how does that make you feel? And I could understand if people walked out because of that, because it does make you think, oh yeah, I kind of guess I did come to this to see them get killed and tortured on screen. And when you're not giving me that, what does that say about me, right?
Yeah.
I like the movie. I liked it a lot, actually. But there's a part of me that's like, okay, well, but also, are you going to get upset with someone who goes to Six Flags and then they get on the roller coaster, but surprise, there's no loop-de-loops and it's a flat track? But what does that say about you that you wanted a roller coaster that was scary? It's like, well, yeah, man, I came for that. What do you want from me?
Yeah.
But I really liked it. And it was interesting. I mean, the protagonists of the movie were the murderers because they had all the agency. And it was interesting to see a movie in which basically the people with the most agency and control and power in the movie are the antagonists, because the protagonists, like the people watching the movie, like us, we have to sit there and watch as all of our expectations and the conventions of the medium are undone before us, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I also just think the acting is incredibly good.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
I mean, that 11-minute take after the son dies is just like, and it's excruciating to watch.
Yeah, it's a great scene.
I totally agree with you. I have the same feeling about Hanukkah. I think he liked the reaction at Cannes. He said it was a success because he pissed people off as well. He's just needling people that way. But, in some ways, it's almost that the reactions to violence, like here's a way to think of it. He keeps in all of the actual horrible things, which is like in that scene, okay, we didn't see the son die, but now you have to watch for 11 minutes as the parents who are in the room with their dead son have to like realize that. And there's that moment where like she's helping him up and then she looks and she starts breaking down and then he helps her out. And it's like excruciating. And in some ways, I think the anti-horror film part of it is that he takes out
the thrill. He only gives you the terrible feeling afterwards.
The pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, he only gives you like the actual horror, which is, this might sound silly, but the gruesome death or whatever is kind of fun to watch for the horror fan for whatever. But you don't have to sit with, oh, that character has a mother who's now going to get the phone call that her daughter's dead and she's going to be devastated for the rest of her. But he's like, I'm going to give you that part. So it's like, oh shit, like what are you actually giving me here on each scene is actually like the most horrible part of what happens on screen without showing it. So like I said, maybe it was a bad pick because it's not exactly a horror film. It's an anti-horror film.
No, it was a great pick. Yeah, I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I think he's just a masterful filmmaker. So because it's to your question of like, I couldn't even answer it of like, why do you like horror films? And I'm like, I don't even really know. And so maybe that's why I like this one, because I'm like, he makes me question like, the movie upsets me as well, but in a good way, where I'm like, I can appreciate the filmmaking. And maybe it's because you and I both like making films and trying to make films and writing, is it reminds me of the ultimate power of how manipulative this medium is and how successful it can be, that I just love. He clearly is a master of the craft. He's directed a ton of films before. He knew what he was doing with such confidence to make those crazy choices, and you would trust him. And so I like that comment of look what movies can do.
Yeah.
And then a little bit of, be careful with the violence because it matters. Like it hurts and it can, and there's something in the audience that really craves it. So maybe it's a filmmaker's film in some ways. It's talking to other filmmakers in some ways to like, be careful. We can do all this stuff. I'm going to show you a lot of techniques that you probably didn't even think you could do as a filmmaker and as a writer, but you can. And the audience will stay, at least most of them, and they'll go with it, or they'll walk out and be pissed because it was too effective.
It's beautifully made.
Yeah, beautifully made.
Watching it, he knows all the moves.
Yeah.
He could make a fantastic straight ahead horror film because he knows exactly how to do it. And he knows how to build tension, and he knows how to operate within a frame. Well written, well acted, well structured.
And speaking of genre-breaking directors, like he does tons of non-horror films. Like he just did Amour, which was like a love. I don't know if you saw that one. It was about an older couple where she has a stroke, and it's like a romantic tragedy. Like he's not a horror film director. He's just a filmmaker who can do a lot of stuff. So
to transition from a movie that breaks conventions to one that executes on them, I think pretty damn well. Let's talk about The Thing. It is based on John W. Campbell's 1938 novella, Who Goes There, which had already been adapted into a film once before in 1951 called The Thing from Another World, which is strikingly different from the novella and from this movie, which is much more true to the source material. It takes place in the Antarctic in the middle of winter, follows 12 men, scientists, researchers who are isolated in a research facility. And then as the movie opens, they are visited by a sled dog who is fleeing a Norwegian helicopter with a sniper on it who is trying to shoot this dog. As the audience, you're like, what is going on? And why is this helicopter and sniper chasing this sled dog across the Arctic? And the dog basically finds this American research lab, and the sniper tries to kill it, and the sniper and the pilot both get killed. And then these 12 men at this research base are left to wonder, why is this dog here? And then things get really crazy really quickly. And it turns out, and actually in the very first scene of the movie, you see a UFO heading towards Earth, breaking into the atmosphere. And it could be landing, it could be crashing, looks a little wobbly. And then you flash forward to the present day with the dog. And over the course of the film, you learn that there is this thing, this alien life form, which is slowly trying to assimilate and turn into the different crew members in this research facility. And if it can successfully eliminate them all or replicate them, then when the ice thaws and the summer comes, there is a chance that it could make it to the mainland, make it to the rest of the world, and potentially assimilate everybody and subsume humanity itself.
In 27,000 hours, I think it said. It was very specific.
27,000 hours. And I looked that up. That's about 3 years.
Yeah, I didn't do the math. Thank you.
Yeah. Wilfred Brimley on his 1982 computer was able to figure out exactly how long it would take to assimilate. A very different looking Wilfred Brimley, not the same without the mustache. I love this film so much. Stephen Colbert says it's his favorite film of all time and a film that he watches when he's feeling down. He said it's his happy place, which is, I wouldn't call it that film for me, but I just love it. And it's so truly unique in that the films that I think that you can list on one hand that have this kind of premise where there's something or someone in this group that we can't trust, but we don't know who it is. That genre of film is like actually pretty sparse, because after this movie came out, I was like, I love this. Whatever this is, I want to watch more of it. And it's very hard to find that exact kind of plot device.
I think you're going to get more of it with the AI stuff, like Ex Machina, like the prequel to what you're talking about. Anyway, that's a pin to where I think we're going to get a lot of that, actually.
I love it. I think it's John Carpenter's best film. The soundtrack by Ennio Morricone is fantastic. Originally, John Carpenter was going to compose it because he does a lot of composition on his films, but he was so busy directing and editing the movie that the producer kind of insisted, hey, why don't we use Ennio Morricone? But interestingly enough, John Carpenter basically had Morricone evoke Carpenter's composition style. So Morricone would come to him with these compositions and Carpenter would just be like, no, strip like 50% of the instruments out of what you just gave me and just strip it down, strip it down, strip it down, put more synth in. And Morricone actually wasn't even able to score the finished film. Like he was scoring the film while it was being edited. So there were actually chunks in the movie that he couldn't watch in their totality and score to, which suited Carpenter fine because there's these long moments in the movie in which there's no score at all. But it works so well because the movie does such a fantastic job just building up tension. And it does such a good job very quickly within the first 10 minutes of meeting all these guys, help you understand the social dynamics between them, what their personalities are. And then it just really kicks into high gear pretty quickly. And one thing I really love about this movie, having seen a fair share of horror films now, is that the characters are actually smart. It's a movie where characters are intelligent and they make pretty much as rational decisions as they can make in their scenario, and they're still screwed. The movie does not depend on that horror cliche of characters making stupid decisions. They pretty much act how you would act in this scenario as quickly as you probably would as it's playing out. And that's one of the things that's really refreshing and rewarding about it. But Jay, before I talk more, what did you think about The Thing?
I went in totally cold. I knew it was a cult classic. It was a canon film, but I knew literally nothing about it. So I really, really liked it, first of all. I guess I knew I was going to get like monster stuff because John Carpenter and the creature stuff. So that was exciting.
The creature stuff's so good.
Yeah. But what I didn't know is, and if they find it, they probably skipped to this point in your podcast, of like the huge amount of fandom for this film. So I went into some of the YouTube like breakdowns of it, and they have a lot of views, and people are insane about this film and go through like frame by frame piecing together the whodunit and tracking the assimilation. I am not one of those people. So if you are, as the listener, and you found this to be like, I need more like breakdowns of who the thing is and a theory of this, like I'm not that guy. I only watched it a couple times. But I could see myself getting the bug of trying to figure out exactly what was going on in this film. And you've clearly done some of the research of, how it was made. It's a cool story. Yeah, I think I was sort of just jaw open the first time I went through it. There's a lot of characters to keep track of. It's a really complex film.
Carved down from 37 in the novella.
Oh, really? Wow.
There were 37 men at this research base, and the screenwriter was like, I can't, 37's too many. So he carved it down to 12.
I think it's a film you kind of have to watch multiple times. It's that complex, which is surprising for a horror film and a monster film. This one, you won't actually understand the dynamics and the tensions and the particular brand of paranoia in each scene unless you're like I missed a ton on the first time of like, oh wait, part of the thing broke itself off and is in the snow. And so like, I don't know where that is. And it could have infected someone. I mean, we never get to see a full assimilation from beginning to end.
Correct.
We actually don't know what, and that's the part of the process that actually really, really works. So back to why I like horror films as an analogy for like, what is this really about? It's not just about a monster and a silly, weird horror film. It's about paranoia. And of course, I had pieced this together before I saw some of the breakdowns, but a ton of horror films around that time of the zombie genre were analogies to the AIDS epidemic and other things, especially when they get to the blood and is your blood clean and pure, that amazing scene. It's kind of on the nose of like, who would you know? This person looks like everyone else. I mean, I don't know if there's been any like homoerotic breakdowns of the film, but you got 12 men on a base. And I don't, I've seen a million breakdowns of this thing on YouTube, but I don't know if anyone's done like, are they gay? But I was also thinking that at the time of like, this is clearly a film about AIDS and paranoia in this community of men of like, how would you know if this person is clean or not? Because we only see this assimilation process on screen interrupted in its very strange, most grotesque transformation periods.
We see bits and pieces. And one of the things that I love about this movie, the first time, and you have to watch it a second time to know that this is the first time that it's happening. The first assimilation that we don't know is an assimilation the first time you watch it is when the dog enters the room of one of the guys and you just see the dog and the guy in silhouette.
Yeah, well, you kind of know. I mean, something's going to happen there. Yeah.
But you don't know what it is and you don't know
who it is. Yeah.
What happens in that scene and how it was filmed is the entire reason I think this movie works so well and why a million video essays have been made about it and why I think so many of the video essays are actually missing the mark by trying to figure out the order of events. So the silhouette of the first man we see infected by the thing is shown only in silhouette, and it's not the silhouette of any of the cast members. Carpenter actually, he chose a crew member.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
He had a crew member sit on the bed because he didn't want anyone to be able to be identified by their own silhouette because he was like, that's actually not the point. Knowing the order of who is infected first and the reason why, like we see when the infected dog is being killed, we never find out, does that little bit of the thing that escapes, does he assimilate anyone? We don't know the chain of events that leads to each person being assimilated. And I think that ambiguity is what makes the movie so good. Your mind wants to solve the puzzle, but that's actually not the point of it.
It's going to get all of them no matter what. You kind of have a feeling that by the end of this, it's going to win. I think you just kind of know, given the title and stuff. I guess it sucked me in of like, I want to know the rules. Like how is this assimilation happening? And tell me if I'm wrong, I'm sure like you said, there's a million theories of this film, apparently. It's a whole master degree you could get, it seems, in the thing from YouTube. So like the weird mass creature thing, when it starts its assimilation thing is, I don't know, morphing in and out of this crazy thing. And you get the idea. And then it's set on screen by the doctor, whatever his name was, that it takes on forms that it comes into contact with, and it might be millions of years old. And so it can tap into the DNA of a whole host of historical, I don't know, creatures from many, many other planets. And so you just kind of buy like, well, I guess that's how this thing does. But it's also like, why is it? By the way, I don't think Carpenter knew this at the time. Do you know about the Dodder plant?
No.
I couldn't help but thinking of this because I just read Zoe Schlanger's book recently called The Light Eaters about what plant intelligence. This is kind of a philosophical sidebar, a scientific one, but an interesting one. I think it's in South America. The Dodder plant, Dodder, is a vine that can do some incredible things that we're finding out about. I mean, plant intelligence and plant sense is a really interesting topic to just get into for any of the listeners who want to go down that path. But the Dodder plant, it might be able to sniff, in quotes. It can sense plants around it. But the weird thing that we're finding out it can do, it's like a vine that can wrap around a plant, and then it can mimic that plant. Like it could change its leaf shape to look like the plant that it's tapping into. And we don't even know how it's really doing it. But I was thinking of this thing, if you look up the Dodder, it's an amazing, crazy plant. I was thinking of the thing as basically the Dodder plant with a much higher level of intelligence. But when it's doing the transformation thing, it's like creating this massive, weird blob of creature stuff, which has all kinds of fun horror movie faces coming out and screaming and stuff. If it's an intelligent being that can just sort of like tap into you and like mimic you, why does it need to do this wild, wacky, horrifying transformation? But, and then again, I bet there's a theory on this, but part of it breaks off and goes off somewhere else. So maybe, again, I don't know if this is the analogy, it creates this horrific mass of grossness that scares the shit out of everybody around it, and they flame it every time they see that thing. But there's some other little tiny one that actually goes off and just becomes another being or whatever. Like the dog at the beginning is not it's a regular looking dog. So we get the knowledge that, well, at some point it stops doing this gross, weird, crazy thing and just whatever becomes you or breaks off. Was that thing going to break off into another bunch of stuff? Or is the point, and I've seen people theorize about this, that it's actually an analogy to like, a Tower of Babel situation of humans not trusting each other. And apparently someone wrote a story or something, or maybe there's a novella of the thing from the perspective of the thing, and it's like the sympathetic character trying to bring all these humans together, and it just keeps getting killed by them. Pretty brilliant, if that's the thing. And McCready as the main guy is like the antithesis of the thing.
Kurt Russell, yeah.
Kurt Russell's character is not social. We see him at the beginning alone, playing by himself, and he's got PTSD, and he's drunk. And he doesn't even remember that they're not Norwegian. He calls them Swedish, but they're Norwegian. Like he's that aloof to his fellow man. The thing hates him because he doesn't just make friends with people. So it's a cool theory. But if you go further with that theory, it could kind of make sense that it's almost like a test to be like, I'm going to leave this grotesque, scary monstrosity of a thing. But that's not actually the thing. That's a decoy to just scare you. And it's a challenge. And I'm actually slithering off as a smaller thing, and I'm going to just go become a dog, and it's not even that gross, and you'll just never know, and I'll just be that other thing. I mean, that's what I was like, why does it have to change in this crazy way? And I'm assigning intelligence to it. So I'm giving it a little bit of a dilemma that it's giving to the humans who consistently fail because they just torch it and get more and more paranoid, and the thing's disappointed that it just can't get its message across. Yeah, that's not entirely my theory, but it might be a little bit unique if any of the nerds found me just now. You could credit me with the thing's a decoy. The gross stuff is a decoy. I don't know.
I like that theory. I don't think we're ever supposed to know exactly how it works. Again, I think that the ambiguity is the point because it adds to the tension and the paranoia and the sense of like what is going on. My understanding of it, though, is that it kills you, subsumes you, and then duplicates you. It would wrap you with its tentacles, break your body down until you cease to exist, and then build the copy of you back up. And it has all of your memories, all of your intelligence. So there would only be one body remaining, but that body would be the thing, and your body would be gone.
But in the meantime, it's doing a weird all over the map of all of its weird. Yeah, I mean, I guess it seems like a rather long route to like the final thing of just like, why don't you just infect me like a disease? A disease doesn't turn me into an elephant for 2 seconds and then back into a human.
Right.
So I'm assigning it some rational reason for doing this insane thing, like such a cool creature, the one that they torch that's like this blob with an eyeball. Like there's a dog, the head in there somewhere, and then later the stomach opens up and chomps his hands off. And like,
right.
It does a lot of insane horror movie stuff that does feel extra.
That scene, though, where he's trying to shock the dead body back to life.
It's amazing.
Their chest opens up with teeth and his hands get caught in there. And then it bites his hands off. So then he only has stumps. So that scene where that happens, when they cut to the wide and the guy has like stumps for hands, it's a body double with, I think, a war veteran or basically someone who had lost their hands. And so in that brief moment where we see someone without hands or upper parts of their arm, that is someone else who is missing those things. Yeah, I mean, this movie could work, I don't know if just as well, but this movie would work very well if the thing operated like you're describing, where it's basically just, if it can get like a couple of particles in you, or if it can get just a little bit of goo on you, then it wouldn't need to replace you. It can just overtake you from inside and basically like a parasite. It could definitely do that. But I also think that it wouldn't be as memorable or distinctive because so much of the iconography of that movie that moment in that scene after the guy gets his hands bitten off, and then the little bit of the thing that breaks off grows. It's like his head, like his decapitated head, then grows spider limbs outside of it and antenna and like crawls off. Like that moment is so iconic because you're watching it and then the other characters are watching it and you're like, what is this? And the fact that you never truly understand how it works or operates, I think is kind of the point, because If you could truly understand it and understand how it replicates and why does it take so long and what are the mechanics behind all this, some of that would be lost. And also the title, frankly, I don't think would work as well. But the fact that it is called The Thing and you're looking at it and you're like, I don't know how this thing works. It works in that way, I think.
And I think, yes, because what you were talking about before of like something just infecting you and not really transforming you in some big grotesque way is a zombie film, right? I mean, like sometimes they get green and they like you can see it in their eyes or whatever, but that's a zombie film, which is an amazing genre. I love the zombie genre for that. But this one is different. I'm with you. I watched probably 3, I should credit them. I think one was called A Deep Dive. Someone else, this big Southern guy who kept saying the word fixin', I really liked it. I think I watched like 3 different YouTube breakdowns because I was like, there's clearly a cult obsession.
I love that you did that. It speaks well of the film that you did that, I think.
This speaks well of the film and this lovely tradition we have where I'm like, I want to tell Michael like what's going. Well, clearly there's a lot to this film and people get into it. But I also, maybe I'm just being a stickler and I think they're all barking up the wrong tree also. Because here it is.
Let's talk about the ending.
Well, this is the ending, but yeah, because people get obsessed with who's the thing at the end or whatever. Is again, the mechanics of the thing I think are all there to see, and people are actually getting too obsessed with trying to figure out the lineage of how it infects people. It's not like a game of tag. It's not tagging who's the thing now. It's not jumping from person to person, especially because, again, if the mechanics are the thing has a kind of intelligence and it can tap into a very deep reservoir of DNA and evolution tricks of the universe at this point. So like you say, the antenna and the tentacles thing might sound crazy, but not if it knows what an octopus and an ant does, whatever, like, and a million other alien things that it's touched before. Well, that information, that intelligence is not trapped within a brain of the thing. It's kind of in all of the things. Like if a piece of it breaks off and goes, it's like a hologram. The whole picture is in every part of it.
Every piece of its DNA contains all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, or has access to it at least or whatever. So if that little head thing jumps off and goes away, it has everything that the big thing that got inflamed is as well. And so, you know, I know people go into that dog licking in the very first scene. Was that a transfer? It just needs to get the DNA or whatever. But it could probably, if it gets the first person's DNA and the third person's DNA and the fourth person's DNA, it could become all of them at any time if it wants to. There doesn't need to be this lineage of a game of tag that you're trying to figure out in the movie of who's the thing now. 4 or 5 of them could be the thing and assimilated all at the same time or whatever. And the thing could be 3 of them, I guess, if it wanted. Like, you're seeing the real one on screen. It doesn't even like matter at that point. The mechanics of the thing working are scarier than even I think all of the people on YouTube trying to figure out are figuring out. They're thinking about it too much in a linear way. It's scarier. So the paranoia is actually like, oh yeah, there's no beating this, and there's no stopping this, and there's no way around this. None of the characters have an answer to this to get out of this. So yes, I think that's what I got involved in watching it the first time and then watching some of the YouTube breakdowns of like, it's not a slasher film. I'm not trying to track where the murderer is. I'm actually learning the mechanics of the thing, like you said, are more total and more dangerous and more unbeatable in every instance that you get a little bit more information of it. Then yeah, it's cool to just kind of watch it play out. Like you said, the characters act rationally and wait until their ending. Yeah.
What is great about the movie and what is great about the ending, to your point, Jay, at any point in the film, the thing could be everyone or no one.
Yeah.
In any given room, because we don't know how it spreads, in any given room of 3 or 4 guys, because they kind of roam around in groups and then they recoalesce and they break off again. Like at any moment, the 2 or 4 guys you're watching, none of them could be the thing. 2 of them could be the thing. All of them might be the thing. We don't know what percentage of them in any room, and neither do they. And that's why, for my money, so many of these like ending breakdowns, was Childs the thing? Was McCready the thing? Were they both the thing? My headcanon is that neither of them are the thing at that point. But the fact that they can't trust each other and they are both going to die in the cold because they have burned the entire lab to the ground in order to try and defeat the thing, because the thing, only way to kill it is with fire. If neither of them is the thing, but they're both going to die anyway because they can't trust each other any longer.
Or themselves, yeah.
Like that, to me, is the point. The fact that you don't know how it spreads and you don't know who it's become. The real villain of the movie is something that they cannot escape, which is their own paranoia. That's what makes the movie great to me.
Yeah.
What do you think about the ending?
I didn't care, I guess, from you telling, like, I agree. And you see how I kind of was figuring out the mechanics of the thing where I was like, I don't care who the thing is. It was great. I was watching their paranoia. I wasn't trying to figure out who should really kill who or whatever. And so at that point, it was really successful that I was thinking, well, so if the thing is real and the thing wants to, whether it's some altruistic alien who wants to connect everyone in this weird way, or wants to just take over people, because that's just what evolution does, it does need to touch the DNA or whatever, and it does need to get off of Antarctica, right? There's very little chance, but it could maybe touch a penguin or a fish or something and maybe get lucky. Like, it's
right.
Antarctica is a great setting for this idea because it is kind of a natural, isolated, like it's stuck there. And so these two men who have knowledge of the thing, if they want to save humanity, as it were, or keep humanity from the thing, let's just put it that way, because we don't know what the thing is trying to do, they should both die. They should both kill themselves, which MacReady threatens to do at some point, which is cool. And so that was cool. So at that point, I was fully on board with, there's no creatures, there's no monster in this scene. It's just two men dealing with their paranoia. And then maybe, again, to extend the analogy, dealing with whatever happened to these guys, they're like, they can't go back to society. Like they should, like they will infect people with their paranoia, with their psychosis, with their fear of other man, of their fear of the universe, that there's an alien out there who, can come kill us anytime. And so the ending, I thought, the honorable thing, or maybe the unavoidable thing, is that, they both would have to die, which, again, I don't think I saw this in the YouTube one. Have people noticed that that's probably what happened in the Norwegian camp? Because the very first body that you see is a frozen corpse, but he's got a razor blade. And you're like, did he kill himself? Did he take his own life? Well, that seems to be, that guy had concluded he should do that. Clearly unsuccessful. The thing had gotten into the dog, and at least one of them knew that he should try. But, and then again, for the Tower of Babel thing, I don't think he said this at the beginning when he yells in Norwegian, there's no subtitles, and probably 0.002% of the audience speaks Norwegian enough to, and he's just saying, what, like, kill it, it's not a dog, it's some kind of thing, are you guys crazy, get out of the way. Exactly what you would expect him to say, but none of them understand Norwegian. And then you could kind of do the, like, well, if that's real, if that guy really wasn't a thing and the dog was the thing, and he was sure, hey, we can end this nightmare now, just kill that dog. All they needed to do was know Norwegian or be a little friendly, but the Tower of Babel was like, we don't know what that guy's saying, and now we're screwed. So like this one little, like, you could revise the whole film. If someone was like, I know Norwegian, kill that dog, no movie, humanity's saved. You get the kind of like moralistic, like, hey, maybe we should all love each other and learn Norwegian or something.
No, you're right. But it all hinges on, there's this foreign intruder who we think is there to harm us. And so we react violently because we don't understand him.
Yeah. We think he's just crazy. He shot one of us.
Yeah. I don't know if this could have come from a video essay or my own mind. I've seen so many video essays on the thing now that I'm not actually sure. It's like when you think you have a childhood memory, but you are in fact remembering a Polaroid you looked at when you were slightly older.
Well, you're probably the thing at this point. So I don't know if I could trust you at this point. Yeah,
I know.
You've got your own motives for recommending the film in the first place. I think this is all part of a big, elaborate alien scheme.
I need to assimilate all of Spain. The first scene with Kurt Russell's character, MacReady, foreshadows the movie's ending. Because what does MacReady do when the computer beats him in chess? He pours his scotch into the computer, destroying it so that he can never use it again. And so what does he do at the end when he can't be sure if they'll be able to survive? He burns the entire lab to the ground, dooming himself and all the other humans there in his own way, being like, if I can't win, then no one can play. And it was just this fun thing where, like, you literally, the first scene you get with him, you fully understand the kind of person he is and what he will do if he feels like he's losing. And it's just a great little bookend.
I think it's brilliant. And I really loved the film. And if you do like the full on, was any of this real or was this all in someone's head kind of turn that a lot of horror films can do, it's pretty fun to play with the idea that MacReady, I guess in the script, he was written as like a PTSD Vietnam vet who was like clearly dealing with stuff. If this is actually just a story of him descending into madness and burning a place down, it works in that regard too, because he is the only character you see introduced in isolation, and which alerts, again, back to the filmmaking techniques, is the way to tell your audience, hey, that's the guy, that's kind of the main character. Everyone else is an ensemble cast. Pay attention to this guy. And so you're like, okay. And he doesn't sleep. So is he also just going a little mad and, burning a place down? So for every film, you could kind of do, was any of this real? Because it's a film, but it's a cool analogy for maybe the madness of one individual as well, and paranoia taking him over.
You briefly mentioned the testing the blood scene. Such a good scene.
Yeah.
The film brilliantly uses its special effects that were made by Rob Bottin, creature effects artist. So when McCready is holding the blood sample in his hand, and we're cutting back and forth between him holding it and testing the blood and cutting back to the other characters, they're testing the blood with fire because the thing is like all the particles or all the pieces of whoever it subsumes, then any part of it will react to heat, right? So you can just test blood in a vial or in a petri dish. And if it's the thing, it will react. And if it's regular blood, it won't react. So they get everyone's blood and he's testing the blood with the heated metal piece that is heating from the flamethrower. And you see him holding it like this. When they finally get to blood that has the thing in it, the blood like instantly transforms and like tentacles come out. But to make sure that you as the audience don't see that it's a fake hand when he's holding that petri dish that does have the thing in it, the previous two petri dishes that he tests that don't have the thing, he's holding with a fake hand. It's just that little attention to detail so that your mind accepts that as Kurt Russell's real hand, because they realize probably if we cut from his real hand holding it to a fake hand holding it, you will instantly understand the difference.
Yeah, you would see it.
So Quentin Tarantino has mentioned this as his favorite horror film.
Oh, right. It was The Hateful Eight. Was that the one that this was like a remake of? Or an homage, as it were?
The main influence for Hateful Eight was The Thing. And I think The Thing is better, but you got people in the middle of a blizzard in one location who can't trust each other. Both use scores by Ennio Morricone. And what was great about that is about half of Morricone's soundtrack for The Thing was not used in the film. So if you go and listen to the soundtrack on Spotify, like half the tracks are really good, but they are not in the film. There's a song in the soundtrack called Bestiality, and it is so good. And if you've seen The Hateful Eight and you're listening to that song on the soundtrack for The Thing, you're like, I've heard this before. I haven't heard it when I was watching The Thing, but I've heard it. And it's because Tarantino had Morricone recompose it for Hateful Eight. And it is a great song. And I'm going to link it in the show notes. But there's so much good music in it. And Carpenter, because he wanted such a minimalist score, didn't use a lot of it, but it's a great soundtrack. Yeah, it's a brilliant film. I'm so glad you liked it.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fun. And it's one of those things, and I don't know if you felt this way with Funny Games, but it's like when you recommend, whether it's a film or a vinyl, to someone who you like and whose opinion you respect, and you're like, God, I hope they like it. I'm putting the force of my whatever cachet I've built up in this relationship that like, I hope that when I recommend this to them, they're like, all right, well, Michael's recommended it to me. It must be good. Or Jay says this soundtrack is great. So I'm sure it is. And then every once in a while you recommend something to someone and you can see on their face, if they're listening to the song for the first time or you're watching the movie with them and you look over and you're like, well, damn it, they don't like it.
Yeah.
So every once in a while. So I'm so glad you liked it because I love it.
Yeah, I could see that. No, it was really, it was fun. I was nervous about Funny Games because I knew, because you told me the story that your wife was working on or is working on a slasher script, I guess, that you're sort of new to the genre. And after I recommended Funny Games, I was like, oh, is that like going to be a little too... But then I remembered it's not Saw, it's not Hostel, which I really like. Like you could have recommended a more like brutal torture porn kind of film because there's a lot of bad ones. But if the premise is good, and I promise for the people who are afraid of Saw, the first 3 or 4 are actually good. There's a real reason for the crazy violence on the screen, and I think it's worth it. But it's just not for everyone. But I was worried when I recommended Funny Games of like, oh, this is too like real. This is too like harsh. But then I remembered, oh wait, there's nothing on screen. Michael will be okay. He can do this. And it's a filmmaker's film. So I thought it was a good one. But yeah, The Thing was fun beginning to end. Yeah. I was also born in 1982.
Samesies.
Yeah. So the year was fun. There's such a look to the 1982 film. I remember watching it when I first watched it and being like, man, I'm not a purist of the digital versus film thing, but I was thinking like, man, digital doesn't look like this. Mm-mm. This feels warm in a way that's just different.
It's so good.
Yeah, and I don't think people are pulling it off. I know Tarantino's a huge film purist, I think,
Yeah.
nerd. So he probably did Hateful Eight with film. I don't even know.
But there is something about the stock of that time. Like every decade has its own look because of the stock they're using, because of how they color it afterwards. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, this is actually super important because of how good this movie is. It was a critical and commercial failure when it was released. It was panned by pretty much every critic. Commercially, it did not make its money back. This was largely the failure of Universal Pictures. So Universal Pictures, they had the rights to, they produced and released both The Thing and E.T.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's the crazy thing. When they watched E.T., when the executives watched E.T., directed by Steven freaking Spielberg, they didn't get it. And they were like, E.T. is either not going to do well or it will do well as a kid's movie. They did not think it would have universal appeal. So they thought, because E.T. is coming out in the summertime and might not do well or is just going to do well with kiddies, we'll release The Thing at the same time as counter-programming for adults. Well, E.T. was an enormous success with children and adults. And The Thing, this is so obvious now, is like an October-November movie. And it had been released in the correct time and not counter-programmed with E.T., I think it would have done a lot better. It's great that it's found like a cult following afterwards because it is, I mean, as we've said here, Jay, like it is such a great movie. But it's so interesting to think it was an absolute flop when it came out.
Yeah, that happens. Happens a lot.
It does.
Yeah, in some ways it helps the cult, cachet of a film. Donnie Darko was a failure. And then, there's a lot of these. So it works better that way.
It's assimilating us now. In the spirit of looking forward, and to wrap us out, Jay, what are your plans and your wishes for 2025?
Well, individually, like I said in the onset, I'm in the midst of a very deep philosophical, historical dive, writing a book. My brain is loaded with a lot of thoughts that I'm having a lot of fun crafting into a real thesis. So I'm privileged to go to a really beautiful library in Madrid. It's the National Library in Spain, and write in a beautiful room. So do that every single day. I'm pretty disciplined about
It sounds amazing.
Yeah, going to write, which won't take all year. So I have plenty of other things to do all year, but I'll probably be working on it for 5 or 6 more months, which is great. But it's funny, I belong to a little philosophy club here at a English-speaking bookstore because my Spanish isn't good enough yet. And it's really fun. And actually just last night, there was like a meeting at the last of the year, and the leader of our little group asked everybody to bring a New Year's resolution and write it down. So it was like a very light philosophy night. And I really never make them. But what I wrote, he randomly picked it out of the box first. And so we discussed it first. What I wrote was despair less, cherish more. And that's the best I can do for it. And I was thinking at the time, this is a reference for your audience. They should absolutely go look it up. And if they don't know it, but do you know Tim Urban, Wait But Why, that blog that he's been doing forever? Wait But Why is great. He does a lot of fun stuff on there. But years and years ago, he did one called The Tail End. I don't know if you know this one. You know this one I'm going to tell you about?
I've had Tim on the show. He's a brilliant guy.
Oh, yeah. He's very funny. But so this particular blog entry, which I don't know how old it is now, but it's just always stuck with me, is visualization that I was thinking of when I wrote that, despair less, cherish more. And it's like, imagine every day of your life as a little emoji and cross it off when it's done. And say you live like 90 years, whatever, and right now you're picturing a whole lot of emojis and however old you are, a crossed off amount. And that's kind of how we think of our lives and our years in a way. But then he did this flip in it of being like, well, let's think of it differently of like things you like. Things. He's a Red Sox fan. So he's like, how many more Red Sox World Series will I get to see in my life? And how many have I seen? And he was like 30 something when he wrote it. So he was guessing, the Red Sox, pretty good team. They spend a lot of money. If they make the World Series once every 12, 13 years or something, that's only like maybe 4 or 5 more. And so when those come around, cherish them. And you may have already crossed off. He had luckily had seen some as a Red Sox fan. But then the ones that really get you are the relationship ones. And the one with like days you spend with your parent. And that one is very alarming because for most of us, at least in sort of the Western world, who move out when we're 18, or maybe it's getting a little later now with the insane economy and everything. Let's say you move out when you're 18 and you basically started seeing them less frequently. Well, from the time you were born to you were 18, you saw them like every single day. And so if you just had a collection of all the days in your entire life, beginning to end, that you have spent with your parents in person, most of them are crossed off already. You're like down to like the last like 12, 13, 14%. And visualizing that.
The percentage, I don't know if he writes it in this essay or if I looked it up afterwards. I can't remember where it is. I'll link to the essay in the show notes.
Yeah, it's a great one.
If you do live that kind of Western Anglo-Saxon lifestyle of like, after you're 18, you go off to college and then you move out and you live on your own. If that is the life that you lead, which many of us, of course, here in America do, by the time you leave the house at 18, you have already spent 90% of the time that you will ever have with your parents. And the rest of the 10% of the time that you will spend with them is spent over the rest of however many decades they are still alive. It's wild to think because when you're a kid, you kind of take it for granted because it's your everyday. And then you realize, oh, wow, almost all the time, all the minutes and hours that I will see my parents have already been spent.
Yeah. So that's the visualization that was like in my head. And now that I live in Spain, I don't have a big family at all, but I see my mother. In fact, about the same as when I lived in America, because a plane's a plane, honestly. But you're talking like 3 or 4 times a year. Holidays, maybe people are listening to this around one. Maybe they're with their parents. Like, put it down. We're almost at the end of the show. Put it down, go spend time with them to cherish those moments more. So that's my general perspective and resolution, as you could call it, for 2025 and beyond. Also because of the work that I'm doing intellectually on my show, of course, with a lot of political philosophy in a fraught world, to say the least, and getting deep into history. History you can despair on, because I'm going through a lot of historical periods that are, tough, ugly, bloody, difficult, and putting them together in a thesis about what moral progress is and on an individual. And so it's intellectually really rewarding, but there's times where I certainly can succumb to like the despair. My whole book is about that history was not inevitable, neither is the present, neither is the future. It's really a humanist book about what we can do rather than this casting history as a god that will be the ultimate judge of the future and all this. Anyway, you'll love it. People will love it, I think. I hope.
I think so.
But I can fall into the despair of my own thesis of, wow, it's like, this is inevitable. We're all going to just kill ourselves. And I always have to pull myself out of there using my own writing and my own argumentation, which I think is sound, but boy, it can be dark. So cherish more, despair less, for myself, for everyone, for you, for me. Yes, for life.
That's lovely. Yeah, I would say as someone who's had my own fair share of despair this year for various reasons, that I think that is such a perfect resolution and wish for 2025 that I will make that mine as well.
The guy stole it yesterday too at the philosophy club, so it's assimilating everyone now.
Hey, that's great. Assimilate away. Despair less, cherish more. Because it's so easy to take for granted. And I feel this now that I'm older, how much I took for granted just the fact that my body never felt any pain for so much of my like 20s and even 30s. And when I say pain, I'm not like in serious pain or anything, but I mean just like the little aches and pains that start affecting you once you're in your late 30s, early 40s. And you're like, oh, this is just kind of a part of my life now. And it's fine. You acclimate, but you realize in retrospect, oh, had I known to really cherish that I can wake up just randomly at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday at 23, get out of bed and never have to worry about tweaking my back when doing that.
Yeah.
Ever have to worry at 22, 23. And now there is always a chance, and I should just go to the gym more and help prevent this, but there is a chance now that I could literally like sit up and now my back's going to hurt for 24 hours.
You better start going to that gym. 2025 is a big year for you. You're going to be carrying a human around who's not going to get any smaller. Your back better get ready.
I'm looking forward to cherishing her. That's for sure. She's going to meet everyone in the neighborhood. I'm going to be so completely obsessed with her. It's going to be so fun. And as much as I have alluded to loss vaguely in this conversation, there's still so much in my life that I am so grateful for and so lucky to have, blessed to have in my life that, yeah, I think 2025 will be a year in which I despair less. I focus on cherishing the things that are in my life that are guaranteed because of our mortality will not be there forever. The things that we cherish now, it's important that we really cherish them because one day, and we don't know when, they will be gone. So well said, Jay.
Thank you. Well,
and with that, Mr. Shapiro, that concludes Boxing Day number 3.
Amazing.
I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I am so glad that you and I have made this little tradition. And while we are not comparing vinyls, I am so glad that every year you and I have an excuse to catch up and geek out on movies. And I am looking forward to the next one, but I am cherishing this one right now in the moment. So Jay, thank you again for a wonderful Boxing Day episode. Thank you for being my friend. And thank you for being a guest of the show.
Thank you. Same to all of you. And I told you this when we had the phone call to decide what we're going to do with it this year is I ended up watching, I think, 3 or 4 Kelly Reichardt films in the previous year because you got me hooked. So maybe I'll watch some more John Carpenter stuff. I've seen a few of his other films. I'm already a fan. But no, it's very rewarding. And yeah, it's fun. I think about it throughout the year of like, oh, maybe I'll throw this one at Michael. So that's good. You're in my thoughts.
Well, I'm glad the feeling is mutual.
I'm not gonna do Look Who's Talking just as a preview since you're gonna be a new dad next year because it's a terrible movie. Do you know that one where the baby can talk?
Yeah.
Don't worry, I won't.
Thank goodness.
It won't be that bad.
I appreciate that.
We'll pick a genre though.
Thank you. And if you're looking for a John Carpenter recommendation, I would say my probably second favorite film of his is Big Trouble in Little China.
Right. I've seen it. I love it.
Okay, there you go.
If you want to see Michael Haneke, like I said, like he's not just a horror director, watch him more. You now know what he can do as a filmmaker, love it or hate it in Funny Games. He shows you that like I'm in charge and I'm really good because he's really good. So see what he can do around the block outside of horror as well. He's really good.
I will. And I think the best way to end this episode, considering it's 5 days away, Happy New Year, Jay.
Happy New Year. Enjoy.
I'll see you next year.
All right, later.